All right, for those of you that haven't been inside of the Mac, down here in the lower left-hand corner, you should find Launchpad. If you go ahead and click on Launchpad, it'll come up and give you the icons. And we're looking for the Adobe After Effects 2021, the AE, and let's go ahead and just select that. What's going to happen is it's going to go in, it's going to open up After Effects for us. You're going to see a start menu. It may come up and show you something a little bit different than what I have on mine, just based upon what was last into here. If you haven't created an account or haven't logged in, go ahead and set that up. You should be able to log in using just your regular email. It's going to ask you to set up an account, but go ahead and create that. And then once you go in and create that, it will allow you to log in. You'll use that same login for each of the applications on this machine. That does not allow you to log in elsewhere, so you can't go home and just download Creative Cloud and log into it. You will need a subscription. Depending on how many classes you have with me, Creative Cloud's probably going to be the cheapest. One for just After Effects. Last I checked, most of the applications, they were charging right around $20 a month just for individual applications. And I think as a student for the first year when you sign up, it's like $25 for the entire Creative Cloud. So the downfall with it is I believe they're going to make you pay an annual setup right away. I don't know if they're letting you do a monthly, and then it's a 1-year contract, of course, and you can pay monthly for that. So everybody logged in? Yes. Okay, once it starts up, this is something that's kind of new inside of the cloud. Is a lot of them have a tutorial that's set up inside of here. You are free to work through this if you want to. What's going to happen when you go in and set that up is it's going to just simply go through and talk about the different panels that we're going to be working with. As we go through lesson 1, getting to know the workflow, you're going to find that most of the stuff is repeated over and over again. The main thing we're going to end up working with is going to be our project panel. As we go through and work with our project panel, this is essentially the repository of where all of the files that we're going to be using inside of any given project are going to actually live. Because when we start dealing with our composition, it's going to show us what's going on screen at that time. And then down here on the bottom part is our timeline. And this is going to show us all of our media assets, the layers that are there, the stacking order of them, so we know what's on top of what. So that way when we go through and play something, if you have text that's behind an image, it's going to never be seen. So we'll pay attention to what is down there. We can adjust these panels. So if you go in between any of them, you'll see these guides. This will allow you to go ahead and move those around. You are free to adjust these really any way that you want to. So increase, decrease, as we start working with a timeline, if you get more and more files in there or more and more layers inside of there, you may find that you want to go ahead and change the size of that. And then once we go in, we're going to start working with additional things. Here's another one where we can go in and continue to learn the basics. If you want to get back to that, at the top of your screen, these are going to be our workspaces. You'll see here we have our Learn workspace. It's going to set everything up just the way you see it on here right now. We also go over to our standard small screen, libraries, and if we pull this up, we can see what else is available to us inside of here dealing with effects. If we're working with color, if we're dealing with animation. Really just depends on what exactly you're doing if you want to go in and switch those. I will tell you that most of the time I don't spend a whole lot of time changing my workspace. If I need a panel, I'll open the panel up and then I'll modify the size of it based upon the real estate that I have on the actual screen. If you go ahead and click in here on standard, you'll see it takes us back. It removes what was there. Yours should look just like this. The only thing that may be different on yours, because I was playing around with this a little bit earlier today, is that down here in the effects and presets, that may be a little smaller. If you move everything around, and after you move them around, you're like, I can't find what I need, or you get on here and somebody else has worked on it and moved the stuff. On any of these, if you go ahead and click the hamburger menu, it's the 3 lines directly next to any of the workspace. You can go ahead and just click on Reset to Saved Layout, and you'll see it goes in and adjusts it. In this case, when we start looking at the standard, over here on the right-hand side, you'll see the effects and presets are really small. If you're working on effects and presets, my guess is you're probably going to want to have this panel a little larger than this, because right now if I do a search for anything, we're not going to see anything in here because this panel is actually such a small panel over here. If we were to come in here and click on some of these, you can go to any of them that you want to. So if we go in here to effects, you'll see that it comes over here and gives me my effects controls. Right now this isn't going to mean a whole lot to you because we haven't gotten into it, but these will be all of our controls based upon whatever effects we go in and we ultimately apply to them. If you go ahead and click on the other ones to see what's happening here, so we start looking in small screen, depending on what you're working. If you're working on a little 13-inch display, you may go ahead and choose this. What it does, if you look on the right, is it kind of stacks up the different items over here. If you click on libraries, there's our main library panel. If you keep an eye on the left, you'll see that most of the stuff dealing with your project composition and timeline are going to stay the same. It's mainly just taking care of and focusing on that right side real estate to go ahead and give us access to the other items that we have on there. If you go back and you click on default, this will take us back in here to the project. On the right, you're going to see that a lot of the other stuff that we work with are going to show up over here. So you can see audio, you can see preview, effects and presets. If we come over here and we click on any of these, you're going to notice that it automatically goes ahead and expands out. This will allow us to work on that area, allow us to adjust what is there. If you simply click back on the name one more time, it will then go ahead and collapse that back down. So it's another quick way to work. Which one you decide to use really, again, is completely up to you. But if you're working along with me, you're going to find that sticking with what it is that I am using is probably going to be the easiest for you to see where the individual content is at. Questions at this point? All right, so that's the basics when we just look at what's inside of here. The more that we go in and we start working with the stuff, what you're going to find is that there's going to be things you like that may be similar to what I use. There may be things that are entirely different than what I use. So we're going to go ahead and jump into lesson 1, because I think the best way to really get you used to the application and the process is to actually go through a project or go through a lesson. So in this case, we're going to go into lesson 1, which starts on page 8 in the book that I have here. It's getting to know the workflow. So inside of it, we're actually going to create a project and import footage. We're going to create compositions and arrange layers. We're going to navigate the Adobe After Effects interface. We'll use the project composition and timeline panels. We'll transform layer properties. We'll apply basic effects. We'll create keyframes. We'll preview your work, customize the workspace, adjust preferences related to the user interface, and then finally, we're going to go in and look at what additional resources are available to us as we go in and use After Effects. So when you first bring it up, as I said, we do have our screen that looks just like this. Across the top, we have our main menus. So there's our file, our edit, our compositions, our layer, any effects that we go in here and start to work with. Animation setups, this can allow us to go in and even browse presets. When we get into other lessons, you're going to see we're going to go ahead and apply some presets to them. What is it that we're viewing? So when we start working with stuff, we might find that we have to go in and adjust our resolution. The window. So any of the panels that we see on here are available to us inside of this window drop down. So if you're looking for effects and presets, they're not on there, you can come into here. If you're looking at a media browser, you can come into here. If you see a check mark next to it, it means that it is visible on the actual screen. There will be times that you start working with stuff, you're like, why can I not find, say, effects and presets? It's there. It will allow us to come out here and work with them. The other thing you're going to notice down the right-hand side of the menu are shortcuts. So if you're working and you want to see an individual panel, you can use that. So in this case, we're looking at Command 5 to bring up effects and presets. Start to commit certain things that you do over and over again. Start to commit those things to memory. It'll speed up the process. It'll make you more efficient. And who doesn't want to do 8 hours worth of work in 4 hours if possible, because we're able to be a lot more efficient as we go in and begin working with it. The other thing we have in here then up here on the top are our tools. So these here are our different tools that will be available to us as we go in and start working inside of After Effects. There's the ability to turn on snapping, so therefore it's going to snap to one another. As we said, we went over here to our workspaces, so we can go ahead and click on those. We have our help. The one nice thing about help is that as we go through and we start to click on things, this is written in a way that allows us to go in. We don't have to go and read where something is at. If you go in the help, you go ahead and you key in what it is you're searching for. If you move down on top of it, it will automatically pop out the different menus and show you exactly where that item is located. So if you go in there, we're working with something, I talk about something, we're doing something, or you remember we did something later on and you just know what the name of it was, go ahead and type it in here. It'll also pop up. The other thing, obviously, you can do is ask me a question with it as well. So that's the nice thing as we go in and we start to work with the help features inside of there. So we do have our project panel over here on the left. We have the composition. We have our timeline. And then down here we have the other panels that are all part of this default setup. That's just like the other ones on the default. If you do go in and change something, you can go ahead and you can adjust this. If you find for some reason that you work with things in an entirely different setup than what we see on any of these workspaces, you are able to save that workspace. So if you move the panels around, you resize the panels, and you say, well, this is the way I really want to work. On any of these, if we go ahead and we click on the hamburger menu, you're going to find that third option down says save a new workspace. If you do that, that'll be a new user-defined workspace. What I usually recommend for you, since these computers are used by multiple people, is if you save the workspace, go ahead and just save it again with your name. So that way you know what it is. If you are making multiple workspaces, you can save it with your name and then whatever that workspace is for you. And that'll allow you to go in and access those, and they will show up then over here on the drop-down menu. Most of the time we go and we create something, if we create a user-defined space, there's going to be a little dividing line that's going to show up inside of there. And I haven't built one inside of 2021 to see if that shows up, but typically the user-defined are always on the bottom. I say that and they're probably now on the top, but they are in there. They're usually divided up away from where the rest of them are at. Questions on just the overall workspace, how this is laid out? All right, let's go in and get started and take a look at what the basic After Effects workflow ends up looking like. So when we start looking at After Effects workflow, we're looking at 6 main steps. So we're going to import and organize our footage. The key on that is that you organize it in a way that you know where the stuff is at. If you are working with other employees, you have coworkers that are going to be using the same files, you're typically going to have some sort of set structure based upon the company as to how those files are going to go in there. So we're going to import and we're going to organize. So creating folders to where things are at. I am not the best to hand my files off to somebody because when I'm working on something, the organization isn't always perfect for you. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to create compositions that we're also going to arrange the layers. Remember, as we go in and we start talking about that, I said we're going to deal with the arrangement of the layers to make sure we're able to see the content that we're actually creating and animating inside of here. We'll then go in and we'll add our effects. We'll animate any elements that are part of it. We will preview our work. Now, even though previewing falls down there in that essentially 5th step, we're going to preview constantly. We're going to move something, we're going to preview. Spacebar preview being the most prevalent that you're going to use. Hit spacebar, watch it play. What worked, what didn't work, what do we need to adjust, placements of things. And then lastly, once we're done, we're going to go ahead and we're going to render an output to that final composition, designing or taking that and exporting it so that it's rendered out to the specific space. Where is it going to? What are the requirements of it? Does it have to be high definition? Does it not have to be high definition? Is it something simply that's going to the web? Are we putting it on a display somewhere else? So those are all the things we have to think about as we go through and work with it. Now, if we go in and start to think about what is it that we're going to create, if you look inside of that lesson folder, there is the movie inside of here. So the finished movie looks like this. So it's a simple movie here where we're going in and we're, in this case, we have this dog swimming in the pool. We're going to go ahead and add our text on there. So we see our on the move text that's there, but then there was also a little sweep of light that came over top of it just to give us a little bit more of a highlight to that. So with this, what we need to start to think about then is we need to go back in and think about that process. So now we're going to go ahead and create a project and go ahead and import ourselves some footage into here. So we've gone in and we've started up After Effects. We have our main menu that's here. If you happen to restart it, yes, you want to close up that tutorial window or any other start menu that might, or start window that might pop up. Depending on, again, how it's set up, you may find a start window that pops up to give you recent projects. And on those recent projects, of course, we can just click on it and it'll then load that project into here. Typically, as we start up, this is what we're going to see. We're starting up with a completely empty project. In this case, it's also known as untitled project. You can see that on the very top of your screen. Now, the other thing to know as we go in and start to work with it, it's going to come up as an untitled project. You're going to see this asterisk at the end of it. That asterisk is just indicating to you that this hasn't been saved. I always say it's like a little warning to you, like, hey, you did a little bit of work. Do you want to lose it? No? Well, then you better save it. So get used to going in. I talked about things inside of here, save early, save often. You will find that you'll be working on things and you'll go to do a preview, and when you hit the space bar to do a preview, the application may shut down. It's not a very good feeling if you didn't hit save right before you go through and run that. So we have this up here. It's a single file. This goes in and it stores everything in here. Kind of think about this as just dumping stuff into a folder or into a suitcase. It's going to hold everything inside of there. So this file has everything in there from the standpoint of knowing where everything is at. So as we go in and we build this, we ultimately need to bring in information. We need to put it into our timeline, into the composition, and then we need to go about composing how this is all going to play together. So we want to add footage to it. So we have our project panel over here. Some people may want to choose to go up here to File, Import. We can go File, Import, File, Multiple Files. This is one way we can go ahead and bring it in. So let's just go ahead and we'll say File, Import, Multiple Files. It's going to bring up our Finder setup here. This is where it's important to know where is it that you went through and saved those. I know mine are saved in my downloads. There's the lessons, lesson 1, assets. That's where everything's going to be at. They're going to be inside that lesson folder. And then we're going to have our assets, and those are the ones we're going to be working with. Yes, there are additional objects inside of there where we end project file, which is what the end Adobe After Effects project looks like. So when we go inside of here, you should notice that you have 3 different files. In this case, we have a movement MP3, which if you look at the little thumbnail, what do we think that one is? Audio. It's an audio file. Also, if we look at the file extension for the MP3, we know that that's also a file extension for audio file. We have our swimming_dog MP4, and then we have this title.psd file. The one thing you're going to find as we start working inside of After Effects is that if you work in Photoshop or Illustrator, the nice thing about it is as we build our layers, After Effects will recognize those layers. So as we go through to work with it, it is very important that as we import things, we import them properly. If we import title.psd as footage, like we're about to with the MP3 and the MP4, it will actually essentially flatten that down into one layer and we can't do anything with it, which is not what we want to do with this. Because it's a situation where we've created a title block and we want to be able to edit that title block. So in this case, let's go ahead and we'll select MP3, and then we can just go ahead and hold down the command key and select the dog, swimming dog MP4. And with that, we're simply going to click on Open. So what you're going to see is it went in and we imported those in there. Now, since I chose multiple files, it comes right back up, so I can go ahead and choose my title.psd, and then we have the ability to change what it is that we're bringing it in as. Now, if you didn't do it this way, what's going to happen with that, if you just said choose file and you've chose those two, is it'll go back and this window won't pop back up, which isn't a big deal either. If it didn't pop back up, we can look at the additional way that we can also import footage is in the bottom of our project panel, down below all of the other things that are in there. If you double click, it's going to bring the same thing up. What you're going to find is that you probably, when you just now used the file import, it's probably the last time you're going to use that. That's the first time I've used it in a long time. And it's just because you don't use that. You're going to come over, you're going to double click inside of there to allow you to import the last thing, which is our title.psd. And if we come over here and we look at our options, we see footage, we see composition, retain layer sizes, and we also have composition. So what's going to happen with this as we import stuff is it can import this as its own composition. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to choose composition for our Photoshop file. And when we click on open, you should get another screen that pops up. Now, if for some reason when you went in and you selected that, you didn't select composition, retain layer sizes, or composition, or you decided, wait a minute, I didn't want this as a composition, I just wanted it as footage. We can adjust that inside of this. However, we're going to leave that on composition, but the key thing here is where it says editable layer styles. We want to keep that. That way, when we go in and we open it up, you're going to see that over inside of our project panel, it's going to look a little bit different than the other items. So we're going to go ahead and say OK. Now, in doing so, if we look over inside of here, the nice thing about After Effects is it does begin to explain to us inside of here what exactly is it that we have going on. So if we go over and look, we can see there's our audio file. We can see here the QuickTime indicating that we have a video file. If we come down here, we see this. This, get used to, that is a composition. So we have a composition. Yes, there's going to be a composition inside of a composition, which we refer to as nesting. So as we go through and start to work with it, we are able to nest these individual items inside of there. Now, if we go ahead and we select any of these files, you will find in the upper left, this here is going to show us a little preview of the file. Now, what this also shows us are the specifications of the file, or the settings related to it. So this is 1280 by 720. So if we look at this, this is still considered high definition since 720 is the start of our HD video. We can see that if this is 7 seconds in nature, and that's what we have going across here. So we look at this, we're looking at hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. Don't think that that's something else on the end of there. That's frames. We see we have 30 frames per second. It's in millions of colors. AVC1, 48 kilohertz, which is allowing us to let us know what is the sample rate based on the audio. If you go and you look at the movement MP3, we see here again MP3 file. We look at the setup based upon 7 seconds and 9 frames. We see down here 44.1 kilohertz. If we go into the title, it's going to show us then a breakdown of what is inside of that title. And this little folder that's here, it is there because this file has multiple layers to it. So inside of Photoshop, there's an ellipse, and there also is then a title here. All of these dividers are able to be moved over to see more information. So in this case, we're able to go in here and see that we have the ellipse 1 title and the title here, which is all part of this title.psd. That's going to be the name of the actual layer inside of Photoshop. If we go in and we actually were to move something, so I were to remove, say, the movement out of that folder on the in the downloads, it's going to end up being missing. We'll have to then go in and search to find where it is at inside of here. Now that we have this set up, what we're going to do is we're going to do a file save, or you can do save as. Since we have it as an untitled project, After Effects says it's an untitled project, which means you didn't mean to name it untitled. So even if we do a save, it's going to automatically pop up our save as setup here. If we go in and we look at our lessons folder, we have other items inside of here. There's the end project file. Here's the finished project. The way this is really set up is they anticipate you're going to go ahead and save this into this finished project folder. So if you do a save or save as, navigate to finished project. And we can go ahead and we can give this a name. And you can name it whatever you want. Dog in pool. Sure. So once we do that, up across the top, you're going to notice that it now changes that link. It shows us where is this actually stored at. So users, username, downloads, lessons, 01, finished project. And then lastly, there's the name of it, AEP, which is short for our After Effects project. So now this is saved to start with. If something happens, we can reopen this, and all of these files are here. We don't have to go back in and import those files. So now that we have this saved, we're going to go in and we're going to start to work on creating a composition. So we're going to go ahead and create everything inside of the composition. So we're going to put all of our animations, all of our layering, everything is going to occur inside of what we have here for our composition. You'll find as we start to work, even on effects, we can either drag them to the composition or we can drag them onto the timeline and that individual layer on the timeline to apply it to that. Compositions actually contain one or more layers. Yes, it is possible to simply bring one thing in. Could we bring in that title composition setup? Yes. And animate just that? Yes. And we will go through and we'll start to work with doing a lot more pre-composing. So we can create one composition, essentially render that down and bring it in and continue to work with it in another area. So let's go ahead and grab some of our footage items. Let's go ahead and bring them down onto the main area. Next, let's just go ahead and grab all three of these. So for selecting each one, we do have the ability, if we hold down Command, it does allow us to select non-contiguous files. If you want to go in here and ultimately select all three of these, we can go ahead and hold down Shift. Don't select that title layers. You'll see that it is a folder over here. Once we bring that title in, it still recognizes those layers there as part of that composition. So we're going to drag those, and we're just going to drag them down here to the bottom. You're going to see the little plus show up, and we're going to go ahead and let go of that. Now, anytime we go through and we start to create a composition, we have to come up with the actual settings related to that composition. We haven't adjusted those yet. Sometimes you want to go in and you're going to create a composition. You're going to set the parameters and specifications for that individual composition prior to starting. Other times you're going to be using a piece of video that you have, and that and that's actually going to come in, and that's going to be what you work off of. So to start off, we're going to go ahead and say we're going to come in here, we're going to create ourselves a single composition. Now from the single composition, we look at use dimensions from. If you click on that, you're going to see that we have movement, which is your MP3. We're going to have our swimming dog, which is the MP4, and we have the title. We're going to go ahead and choose for this to actually use the settings in here related to the swimming dog MP4, because it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to grab the video or the audio, because the audio, remember, was 9 frames longer than the 7-second mark. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to bring this in. Inside of here, if we go ahead and leave it set just as it is and say OK, what's going to happen with this is we've gone in now and we've created a composition that's based on just this individual video. So we know that this is only, in this case, 2 seconds long. So we go through and we play. Or 7 seconds, sorry. So it's working off of that swimming. So we have it set on there as to the settings based on. So what were our video settings for this dog? Remember, we can always go in here and look up here. So in this case, we're at 1280 by 720. Because of the standpoint of this is our swimming dog. You'll see right now it's showing us at 30 seconds. That's because the default for the import of this title ended up being 30 seconds. Once we go in and we build that composition inside of there, so we use the settings based upon the dog, and it ran out to our 30 seconds based on that title setting. If we come here to our composition and we go composition settings, this will allow us to go back in and adjust what is in there. And you see we haven't changed anything, we didn't adjust anything in there, but this is how it went through and built that individual composition. So we can get in here, if we look closely at it, we can see what's happening, our basic. As we move down here, resolution's full. We see here a start time code, our duration. In this case, we're going to go ahead and adjust our duration in here to match that clip. So we're going to take this to 7 seconds. Now this is where when we go and we start to work, as we key in the numbers, you'll see that when I push in 7, you notice that down there for the duration, it starts at 7 frames. So if I do 7 and then I hit 0, now it's going to jump out to where we're actually looking at, in this case, it's going to 70 frames. So that's why you'll see it says 2 seconds, 10 frames. If we hit 0 one more time, you'll see it now it jumps to 7 seconds. And if you continue to hit the zeros, it'll continue to push that over. So there we go out there to 1 minute, 10 seconds. Now we're out here to 7 minutes. We're an hour and 10 minutes, and then we're out here to 3 hours because it's going through and it's looking at those. So as we go through to type it in, get used to keying those in, and that's in that fashion because it's always going to work off of seconds and frames. So if we go ahead and we set that, and we go ahead and change that to 7 and hit return, you'll now see that if we look across the top of our timeline, this is now broken up into 10, 20, there's our 1 second, 10, 20, 2 seconds, 10, 20, 3 seconds. So now the overall length of our composition is now set to the 7 seconds, which is going to match up with what we have for our dog video. So if you go through and preview it now, it's going to go ahead and work its way along until we get to the end of what is here. Now, if you look at your composition, you should see all 3 of your footage items that are brought in. You also then ultimately have 3 layers. As we go through to work with it, these do need to be in a certain order so that we can actually see what is going on with them. As we look at the stacking order, if you guys kind of think of it from the standpoint of whatever's on top is on top of everything. So it's a stack of papers. If you look over here on the far left, you're also going to start to see things that are visible, things that have audio to them. So those are available to us. The one thing that I get in the habit of doing is that my audio is always on the bottom. So if I click on this and drag down, you're going to see that bar show up. That bar is going to the bottom, telling me I'm going to drop movement MP3 down below title. So I let it go, it goes to the bottom. If I grab a hold of title and drag up, you'll see the left bar across the top. If I go ahead and let go of that, we're then going to see it on the very top. Now, nothing says that your audio has to be at the bottom. Everything's going to tell you, though, that if you have a title block that you want to see, it's going to need to be at the top. Otherwise, in this case, it would just simply play behind our video. So now if you reorder those, what you're going to find is that you should now see your title here, which is up there on top of everything else. Now if we go ahead and we have our title set up, there are certain things that are always part of our layers, and those are transform properties. By default, we're going to have our anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. Over on the timeline, you'll see this little disclosure arrow. If you click that down, you're going to see we have transform. And if you toggle that down, you will then see your anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. These are all things that are part of anything that we go in and create. So as we go through and we start to work with those, what you're going to find then is there are shortcut keys that we will also use to allow us to go through and make some adjustments. So for example, if you hit just the letter P when you have title selected, what do you see? Position. So by simply having that selecting, hitting P, that allows us to go ahead and pull up what we have for our position. Now, as we go to work with those, over in the area, you're going to see these blue numbers. Get used to seeing the blue. That's indicating it can be changed. So if you go ahead and hover over it and you see you get this little, what I call the scrubby, because this came in when we started getting scrubby zoom and that. So we get the scrubber. If we go ahead and we simply click and drag to the left, you're going to see it moves to the left there because we're actually reducing the X because it's going to go all the way over. Once we get to X0, it's going to take us all the way to that edge. So we can go and we can adjust that. The other is the Y. So we can take it down or we can take it up. Like I said, if we come in here and we put 0, 0, it's going to take our anchor point, which we can see right here. That anchor point's indicating where that position value comes from. That's sitting right in the center of that layer. So as we go through to work with it, wherever that ends up is where it's going to give us the number. Now they give us an exact number of 265 and 635. So if you type 265 into the X, which is the first value, and hit tab, you'll see it jumps over to the second value. We can go ahead and type in 635, and that's going to place it down there. So again, you just simply click on it, type it in, hit tab, it'll jump over to the next, hit tab again, it's going to jump back to it. As we start to work through things, as you start to interact with them, you'll find that tabbing over works. Once you're done with the values and you want to commit them, just hit return. You'll see it goes away from being able to enter any values, and you should find that your title here ends up in that lower left-hand corner. Everybody get that to work? Okay. So now we have this in position. We're going to go ahead and make sure that we have our title selected. We're going to hit P once again. We're going to keep this clean. So as you're working with stuff, instead of leaving it all the way open, go ahead and just toggle that back shut. You're going to find also as we work, there's going to be some other keys that we're going to use to help close things up, so you don't have to go in there and constantly keep hitting all the different shortcut keys to close them up. So now we have this set. We have other things that we can do to go in and adjust what we have for our color. So we can do color correction, or maybe you want to do something creatively, artistically to completely change what we have for the color on the file. So let's go ahead and come over here to our timeline and select our swimming dog MP4. And then over here on the right, let's go ahead and go to our effects and presets. Let's just go ahead and click on that. Now once you click on your effects and presets, you're going to find that it's going to pop out. And these are all different things that you can go in and you can use. As you start to work early on, you're going to have certain things that you use regularly. And then you're going to find that you're going to go in there and kind of experiment a little bit. And I highly encourage you to get in here and just grab videos and grab effects and drop the effects on there and see what it does. To say that I know all of them would be an absolute lie. And that's because they're constantly changing. They update even effects controls, which gives you more control over the effect. So with that, play with them, use them. Don't be afraid of them. You'll find that you can add stuff to it, and if you don't like it, it's really easy to get rid of them. So we're going to go into our effects and presets. Let's just go ahead and type in contrast. And what's going to do, it's going to break down and show you the different ones that are available to us. So we have image creative, contrast, luminance, contrast, saturation. We have an auto contrast, and then we have a brightness in contrast that is showing up inside of here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come down here. We have the auto contrast inside of our color correction. We're going to go ahead and we're going to use that. So as I said, we can grab a hold of this and we can drag this out onto our image here. If you wanted to, you could also drag it down here. We could drop it onto our swimming MP4. But let's just go ahead and drag it out here. And we're going to drop it on there. As soon as you drop that on there, you should notice a shift in the image. Along with that shift in the image, you should now notice on the left-hand side where we had our effects controls, this is where we had our project. Since we added an effect to it, it's automatically gone in and given us our effects controls. So with that, we can go in, we can look at our smoothing, we can look at our black and white clips. So we start dealing with where exactly are we balancing these out. We have control over what's white. So once we get to a certain point, then that becomes white. When we get to a certain point, that becomes black. So we go through and we start thinking about, again, color correction. That's what we're able to go in and work with inside of here. So if we go ahead and we start to look at this blend with original, if we increase that, what you're going to see is if we go all the way to 100%, what do you think we're seeing? The original. So what it's done with this is it goes in and in essence creates a copy, and then we're adjusting those points as it overlaps. So when we look at that blend with original, if it's at 0, we're seeing just that new image. So we can go ahead and we can allow these to start to blend. If you have worked in Photoshop, this is like a blending mode that we have available to us. So blend with original. If we go 20%, it's just going to soften that up just a little bit for us. Remember, as we're working with this, it's warning us up here that, again, we have it saved. So when you see that, or you start making changes to things and you're liking the way they're looking, at that point, just go ahead and hit Command-S real quick. It's going to go ahead and save that. So now we have this saved. The next thing we want to do with this video is we want to add a little bit to it. If we go through and we play it, again, if you just hit the space bar. Now it's going to go through and it's going to play, and it should be set that it's going to continue to loop. So you can just hit the space bar once again to end what is there, and to navigate between the beginning and the end of any of our compositions. If you look on the keyboard, you'll have a home key. The home key is automatically going to take you back to the beginning. And that's right there where the arrow block is. If you look up there, it says home. If you hit end, it's going to take you to the end of the composition. Get used to working with those. Again, it's a quick way for us to move inside of what's here. Now what we want to add into this is a beam of light. to this clip. So again, we're still working with that swimming dog, the MP4 that's there. So let's go back over to our effects and presets. And once we type something in, the X, we can click on that. It will go ahead and just remove anything that we've typed inside of here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go type in CC, and you can start typing out light. In this case, I have LIG, and we can see here that we have this CC light sweep. And what we want to do is we want to go ahead and put that out there on that same clip. So we're going to grab that, we're going to bring it out here, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to drop it on there. Now once you drop it on there, you're going to see this line come across the composition. That's indicating that we have this individual light here that's going to become our light sweep. Now at any time, if you don't want to go through and play out the full preview, you can go ahead and come down here to our timeline. This is our playhead. So we can grab a hold of that and we can move that, and you can see right there the water is going to be moving. The other thing it's going to do is going to allow us to see what's happening with that light that's there. You're going to notice that right now we haven't done anything to that other than place it on there. So if you wanted something simple like a lens flare or something just to be on there for the look, that works just fine. But right now it is just sitting there. So as we go through to use it, we're going to see over here on the left that we have our auto contrast, which was already placed, and then we have this CC light sweep that's been added to here. As we continue to add additional effects onto individual clips, it's just going to continue to stack them. The other thing to know that when we go into begin to work with those is that just like inside of our timeline, there's a stacking order to those. So if you're using it, something's not looking right or it's changing, check to see if it has to do with the way that it's stacked in there. Sometimes you can't just stack multiple things because they're not going to interact with each other, play friendly, and you're going to get an unintended look to them. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here though where our auto contrast is, and we're going to click on the disclosure arrow to close that up. So the only options we're seeing down here have to do with our CC light sweep. Because as we work, you're going to find that there's a lot of stuff. You start getting those filled, and it's going to get confusing, especially because they're each going to have a location. So if you start looking at locations for things with multiple effects, you change the wrong one. Now you're going to change something you already spent time going in and fixing. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to change the angle of light. Right now we see where our light is sitting right there. If we come up here and we look at our direction, there's a few different ways we can change it. We can go ahead and we can just click and drag on this. We also then have this little, we'll call it a dial. Now if you look at the dial and you notice the way that the dial is sitting there, and we look at the way it looks out here on our composition, we know that that relates to that. So as I begin to swing that, you're going to see that it moves. The other thing you're going to notice is right here is that center point. That center point relates to what we have up here when we start to deal with the center. So if we were to move that left, it will move in there. To the right, it'll move to the right, up, down. It's just going to change where that actual center point is for that. So we can go and we can adjust how we want this to end up looking. They're going for 37 degrees is what they list in here. You can spin it to whatever. I can leave it on 38. We can also key it in. Now when we start looking at this first number, we see 0x. When you get into things that are rotating, that's how many times it's rotated. So if we take it over 360, you'll see that goes to 1. So when you're talking about things that you want to rotate, and you want to rotate 5 times across the screen, we're going to go to 5x. In this case, we're just looking at a placement, so I can go 0. They want 37 degrees. We hit return. That allows it to go in and set there. Later on, as we start working in and start dealing with keyframing and start to understand what exactly are keyframes, you'll begin to see how we're going to play with various settings for that. Now we go through and have it set. Right now we have a really sharp line. So here for our shape, if we click on the drop down, we see that we have linear, we have smooth, and then we have sharp. So the sharp, of course, is almost like a knife cut through there. So you can think about effects. If you wanted to have that, you could allow that to come through there in that fashion. We're going to go ahead and set this to smooth. We can control the width. Now, a lot of times when you're working with this, you're not going to have exact values. Yes, they give us values in the book to go off of, but you can drag that out as large as you want. You can bring it down as small as you want. You'll see an entirely different feeling with it. we got like this beam of light coming through there, or a slice in the page. So you can go ahead and choose whatever you want to choose that you're happy with. So just go ahead and drag that up. We have our sweep intensity. So you can probably look at this and start to think about what could you do with this. As you go through and we start to add things in, what are some effects we can get out of that? So we can go ahead and we can adjust our sweep intensity. If you want to increase it, decrease it. So choose a value. They went 20. You can go make it more if you want. So now we go through and we save this and we drag and just preview what's happening. You'll see now you got that line coming across there. It's a much softer line, almost that look as though, you know, light cutting through maybe part of the house going into the pool. Questions? All right, let's jump into animating. So at this point, we've gone in, we've created a composition. We've gone in, we've imported our footage. We've gone in, we've applied some basic effects to it. Now we need to start to think about how are we going to make things change over time. And that's when we get into working with keyframing. The other thing we'll also work with later on, we'll start getting into expressions. And we'll also deal with keyframe assistance to allow us to create things a little bit easier. Keyframes are the key all the way across everything when it comes to animating any content. So any application you work in that's dealing with animation is going to have keyframing as a key element to it. So we go through, we're going to start looking at this Photoshop one that we brought in. So we're going to come over here to our project panel. And we're going to see that we have our title. Now, what you'll notice about this title inside of the timeline is that title is there. It is a composition. If you double click on that composition, what's going to happen is it's not going to make the other one disappear. It's going to open this up. So we see here we have our title and we have our swimming dog. If I click on swimming dog, it goes back in there. There's the title. We can see the title in the right-hand side of the screen. If I click on title, it goes back in and we have the composition in here. So what's happening now is we're working with the composition called title. We're going to make edits to the title. As we make those edits, they are automatically going back over into our other composition. So as we bring this in here, we have our two layers. We have our title here and we have our ellipse 1. What we have with our title here is this is just placeholder text. We've gone in, we started to build what it is. We don't know what it's going to say just yet. If you start thinking about your favorite TV shows, you're going to find that they have a title block, but then there's different things that show up on there. If you think about things related to sports, the same type of thing. You have the stuff set up, but they change what's on there. That's what we have. We just simply have some placeholder text that's created inside of here. So we go through and begin to work with these items. We have these in here. If we click on them, you'll see that it goes through and shows what's selected. So the ellipse, and we also have the title here, which is our text. As we go through to work with them, we do have multiple compositions that can go in there and be nested within each other. What we want to do though is we want to go ahead and change this text. Well, before we can go ahead and we can change this text, even though we went in, we built the composition, remember we chose editable text, we still have to go in and make the text editable inside of this composition. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to select our title here, text down here inside of our timeline. Once we have that selected, we need to go ahead and change our text. So come up to the top of our screen, we have our layer. Then we need to go ahead and make this into editable text. So inside of our layer, we're going to come down here to create and convert to editable text. If you happen to work in a previous version, it's possible that you're going to find layer and it won't be inside of this create. It'll just be layer, convert to editable text. It's possible also when you work on newer ones that it may move into a different location. But right now it's under layer, create, convert to editable text. Now once you do that, you're going to notice a couple things change. So on the composition out here, you're going to find that all of a sudden the handles clicked in right around your text. The other thing to let you know that it's now editable text is you're going to see that the thumbnail down here for the layer went from being a Photoshop icon to being a T, indicating that that is indeed now text. So now that we have this, it does allow us to go in and begin to change the text that's here. At the top of our screen, we now have our type up here, so we can go ahead and we can select this as well. It allows us to come in here and begin to work with it. As you hover over top of it, you notice when we're outside of it, we get this. What do we think this is? New text. So if we do this, it's going to create us a new text, and it shows a little box indicating for us like a text box. Once we hover over existing text, you're going to see that that goes away, and we just see the what I'd call the insertion point show up, which is going to allow us to go ahead and select the text that is there. Any guesses on what we have for those, what the blue lines really are there for? Alignment? Indirectly, yes. The what? Yeah, so we start thinking about things that are visible. So we go through and we start working. Anytime we put anything on a screen, no two screens are going to be identical. Yes, if you have the exact same model coming off the exact same assembly line, they are going to be the same. But what happens anytime we move things onto screens is we do something called overscan. As we go in and place that on there, it's going to actually scale up to fit based upon exactly pixel dimensions and everything of the screen itself. Now we go through and we look at it. On the outside edge of it, that outside edge is simply just our essentially action safe zone. So with that, everything inside of that should, keyword should, appear on the screen. The next one's inside our title safe. So with that, that's set up so anything that is text-based you want to see and read will be inside of those lines. It is guaranteed to show up on the screen. So as you start to build these things, start to place things, keep in mind action safe, title safe areas. Anytime you're working with video, just be prepared for that. You'll find those guides are going to show up on there. So we have those available to us. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and we want to change our text. Instead of it just being title here, we want to go ahead and replace this placeholder text with real text. So we'll start to look at our tools that are up here. We come over here to our selection tool. We have our hand tool, our zoom tool. We can come in here, we can orbit. We have our pan. We have our dolly towards and away. We're not going to get heavy into those. We get into our rotation tools. Pan behind, so as we go through and start to work with different items. Rectangle tools, pen tools, type tool, brush tool, clone stamp, eraser tool, roto brush. We will deal with roto brush. That allows us to select areas in video, and we'll be able to go ahead and isolate things out. And lastly, the puppet pin. We will work with the puppet tool when we start dealing with animating individual content. Some of these you'll notice come over from other applications. In this case, we're going to choose our horizontal type tool. Once we have that selected, we're going to come out here to where it says title here. Now, if we click once, it's going to give us the insertion point. If you click twice, it should select the word. If you type 3 times or click 3 times, it will go ahead and select the entire line of copy. So in this case, if we click 3 times inside of where it says title here, you should see that this is highlighted. If we go ahead and type in on the move, you're going to see that that text goes in there and changes. Now, once we go and begin work with our text, we want to be able to edit our text. If you went in and you clicked on this, what did you notice happened? Something else happened while you weren't even paying attention to it. What's now on the right-hand side of your screen? Text. So our character panel automatically opens up. So as soon as you go in there and start to work with type and you click to edit the type, it's going to pop open this character panel. Now, if we want to edit this type, make sure that you have all of it selected. So I just went over and I triple-clicked one more time. If you're unsure, you just make sure that it's all highlighted on there. We can then come over here and adjust any of the settings. So maybe the text is too large. As I look at this, I see that my E on move goes outside of my ellipse. I don't want that. I'm a scrubber when it comes to resizing things. So for me, I'd click in here and start to drag over until I get something about the size that I like. I'm at 120 pixels. As we go through and we look at our character, so what we have here is we have our size. So this is the font size. Over here, this is our leading. If you think about it from line spacing, it just comes from the old standard that they used to put strips of lead between your lines of solid block copy when we were actually building sticks. We have here, this deals with our kerning, so it's spaced between 2 characters. We have our tracking, which is the space between selected characters across. Right now this is set to -75. If you look at it, it's a real tight kerning. You may need to expand that out. So in this case, by going to -50, we're going to reduce that down even more. In the sense, we're going to increase the space because we're now going closer to 0. I don't push a whole lot of math on anyone in here, but we will still have to know 0 and negatives and positives. So we're going to go ahead and adjust that. Once you adjust that, you may be happy with the overall size of it. If you're happy with the size of it, you can leave it. If you want them smaller, you can make them smaller. If you want the text larger, you can make it larger. If you wanted to change the typeface, we have that option up here too. So right now it's Myriad Pro semi-bold. If you wanted bold, you could go ahead and choose bold. If you wanted light, you could go to light. This is all about getting that look that you want for the finished setup. Now once you're happy with that, if we go ahead and come out here and we click away from it, we will then see on the move. I'm going to go ahead and hit Command S to save that. Now as we're building this, we have one composition nested in the other composition. So yes, it still exists in there. If we were to come over here to our timeline and click on Swimming Dog, there's the title. Notice that it no longer just simply says title here. That's because it's nested. As we make the changes to that title, we are making changes to our Swimming Dog one as well. So inside of our title, we want to go ahead and add in some animations simply by adding ourselves an animation preset. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to select that layer. We want to make sure that our timeline is back at the beginning. If for some reason you had dragged this out and it's sitting out somewhere like this, we want to go ahead and hit home. And that's because anytime that we actually go in and we apply a preset to it, it's going to apply it based upon where the current playhead is at. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to set that back to its home. So it's at 0. The other thing we can do is up here we have our timestamp. If something else is up there, we can click. You'll see this moves. We can also go ahead and click into it. The nice thing about it is you can just hit 1, 0, hit return, and it's automatically going to go to the 0 frame mark. So that allows us to make sure we are back all the way at the home portion. So let's go ahead and let's come into our effects and presets. So up here we're going to have to go ahead and click on effects and presets. Let's go ahead and click to block out what was there. And we want to go ahead and we're going to click in here and let's do fade up. Now once we start to type that in, you're going to see that we have animation presets. There's text and then it says animate in. Later on we will deal with, in the next lesson, we're going to deal with using presets, browsing presets, being able to preview presets. I'm just going to tell you that in the past it's been a little bit of an issue. It's had some bugs to it to where that the previews don't always work like they're supposed to. So inside of it we're going to do fade up, and we see one here called fade up words. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take that fade up words and we want to go ahead and drag that to our on the move. So we're going to bring it out here. We're going to make sure we're over top of on the move. Notice if I'm out here on the ellipse, it's going to allow me to fade up on the ellipse, but we don't want that. We want to come over here to on the move. So make sure that you see that bounding box that's on there. We're going to go ahead and drop that in there. Now when you do that, if you looked closely, this bar going across here actually went through and changed just a little bit. You saw the change go on. And if we go ahead and toggle open our title here, you're going to see now that we have a text animate is on there. So if I toggle this open again, you're going to see an animator 1. Now this is going on a little bit farther than what we're really addressing at this point, but it has added something to that. Don't worry so much about what's there. Then we go and we can close that back up. Shortcuts as we go through and we start to work with them. If you see me toggle something open, shortcut is there the U, it's the Uber key. No, it doesn't get you a ride anywhere, but if you go ahead and you hit the U key once, it's going to close up where you're at. If you hit it a second time, it's going to close everything up. So you'll see as we start to work with that, we're going to use that key a lot because it speeds up us seeing all the transitions that are in there, or all of the animations that are part of what's there. It also allows us to close everything up as well. A quick thing to see what happens. We went through and we put that on there. What happened to your text? It disappeared. That's because based on this animation, it's fading up, which means right now we're at 0. Nothing's there. It's not on there. As you drag that across, you're going to see it comes in. So we can see on the move works its way in. Now, as we go through to begin to use this, right now this is really basic. We've gone through, we've just created, we allowed this to write all of its keyframes for that. Now we went through and we toggled this down, and actually, let's go this, text, animator 1. If we go through and we look at what did it really do, well, here's what it went through and built. So there's our animator 1, there's our range selector, start of 0. This doesn't make any sense to you right now, which is perfectly fine. The range is 0. As I slide that, notice how the range starts going up. That's because that's the percentage of the individual words that are now appearing. You'll notice these things right here. These are our keyframes. So those are the changes that are occurring as we go through and we start looking at our keyframes. So on that first keyframe, we see that we're at 0%. What do we think the second keyframe is going to say? 100%. Because now we're back, we're showing 100% of the words that are on that layer. So that's how it goes through and allows us to see what is inside of there. So what else can we do with this? Well, let's go ahead and let's close this up. Come on. So now what else can we do to this? We're going to go in and add and then take a look at what's happening with the keyframes and even make some simple adjustments to that. So we're going to animate effects using keyframes. So let's go ahead and make sure we're back at the beginning of our timeline. So you should have all zeros. And we're going to go ahead and go back into our effects and presets, and we're going to go ahead and type in channel blur. You'll see there under blur and sharpen, there is our channel blur. So we're going to go ahead and drag that out onto our title once again. Even though you're not seeing the text actually on there, if you hover over top of it, you're going to see that it's still part of that composition. Now once we go in and we drop that in, you're going to find then up here in the upper left, there's our channel blur. This is our red blurriness, green, blue, alpha, what's happening with edge behavior, and also then dimensions. How are we actually going in and blurring it? Horizontal, and vertical are all options for us. So with that set, what we have is we're at the very beginning of it. So we're making sure we're at the start. So as we start this out, what do we want our settings to be on at the very beginning? That's what we need to go in here and define. So we're going to go ahead and come up here to our red, green, and blue blurriness. And let's go ahead and set red, green, blue, and alpha all to 50. So if I come up here, I can click on this. If I type in 50 and hit tab, notice it allows us to move down. So I can go ahead and put that in there. I'll hit return once I get to the alpha. Now what's happened out here? Nothing at this point because we don't see what's going on with it. If I go ahead and drag this out, notice what's happened to my text. Can you read it right now? No, because we went through and we set up the blurriness inside of there, and it's in there as just being set specifically to that value. So we've already blurred everything out inside of that. So now we want to go ahead and start to look at what else can we control. Well, we said horizontal and vertical. What if I change that just to horizontal? Now what happens when I move it out there? We go through and we look at what's occurred to our text. If I change that from horizontal and I go down here to vertical, now what's going to happen with it? As you move that, you'll start to see how it starts to come in to what's there. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave this on vertical as we go in here and start. So we have our items here. If I go out to that 1 second mark, remember we can come in here, we can click in this if I want to. If I type in 100, it takes me to 1 second. We know 1 second is where that animation ends at. So if I go ahead and I bring that out there and I sit in that spot, this is what it looks like currently at the end. Well, I want to go ahead and I want to adjust this so that we can see what is there. That is where these stopwatches come into play. So we start looking at recording. So in this case, do we want to go through and record ourselves a keyframe? We do. But before I change them here, we didn't start out with a keyframe at the beginning because I just said, oh, I just want to go ahead and apply this to it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the home key to take me back to 0. Because I want to tell After Effects to record keyframes. So all we're going to do is we're going to click on these. Now you can also click and drag down. And those 4 we're going to go ahead and select. Now what happens by doing this is I now have told After Effects I want a keyframe at the 0 mark that has these values to it. So that now when I jump out to that 1 second mark, we're just going to go into that timeline and type out 100. Now that we're out here, we want to go ahead and set those to 0 so that we can see them. So all we're going to do, don't click on the stopwatch to undo it. We want it to continue to record. So all we're going to do is we're going to come out here and hit zeros for each of these. So what we've done is we've recorded a keyframe at the very beginning that gives us a blurriness on all these items at 50 on that vertical blur. And over that 1 second, it's going to go from the 50s to zeros. So now we see that we have our text that's there. So if we go through and we scrub across, you're going to see what happens to that. And just like that, if you haven't worked with keyframes, you just went through and worked and created 2 brand new keyframes that are controlling the content that is in there. So now with that saved, we can go through and we can start to look at then the opacity of the background. So maybe you like this, and if you go jump back over here to your swimming dog and you scrub a bit more, this is a common practice, bouncing back and forth, scrubbing. Maybe you like what you see. Maybe you want to go in and adjust that ellipse. So in this case, we'll jump back over into our actual title. And we're going to come down and we're going to go ahead and click on the ellipse layer. So in the timeline, we're now targeting that. So if you hear me say target, this is what I'm talking about. Click on it, select it. So we're going to go make some changes that target just to this ellipse 1 layer. Now with this selected, we can go ahead and we can toggle this open. And remember, when we start talking about these transform things, all of the same ones are in here. But you're not going to want to keep toggling that open and closed as you go through and work. The shortcut to go through and deal with our opacity, the shortcut is just T. So if you think about it from transparency. So we're going to click on T. There's our opacity. It's currently set to 100. It does allow us to go through and scrubby this as well. We want this to be nice and soft on there, right around 20%. Unless you want it to look more pronounced, and you can go ahead, you can do that as well. Once that's in there, I can go ahead and hit T once again. It will just go ahead and toggle that closed. So then we can go ahead and we can see what's here. I'm going to go ahead and save that, and we'll jump back over here to swimming dog. Now you can see how it goes in there and begins to work with what's there. When we went through and we were looking at it on the other one, we dealt with the transparency. You may have looked at it and said, well, it looked like it got darker. Well, that's because the background on that composition was set to black. So when we first created it at the very bottom, you may not have paid attention to it because it didn't matter to you at this point. But down there, it talks about your background, and actually if you select white, it would have looked entirely different. Doesn't change anything on the final project. It's just as you preview that individual part that is there. Now as we go through and have this set, we can go ahead and click off. There is this preview panel over here where we can go ahead and we can play this. So we can go to our next frame. So if we're looking at something or trying to check something frame by frame, we can do that. We can sit here and go ahead and have it jump to the last frame. We can jump to the first frame, or we can use home and end to do that. And we can go ahead and we can also click on play. You'll also see here shortcut, we have the space bar. We have this ability to go through, and if we change a bunch of things on here, we want to reset it, we can reset that. You'll see here, include what do you want it to go through and play. You can also go ahead and change what do you want it to do. Do you want it just to go to the end, or do you want it to go ahead and loop? So again, depending on what it is you're working on. This one, you may just want it to go to the end. But as you're working on animations, you're trying to time stuff up. A lot of times you're going to watch it over and over again to pick up on where things aren't there. The range, in this case, what's it looking at? So we can control that. We can look at play from. Current time is standard. Frame rate's there. Resolution auto. If you're starting to work with something and for some reason it's starting to bog down, maybe your computer can't handle it, you can change the resolution here. So we're only going to view it in half. So when we go ahead and we start to play it, you're going to notice the quality falls down a little bit. And that's because as it goes through, that quality is going to fall down because what's happening with it is it's not rendering out everything at full resolution. Now by default, when we stop it, it's going to go back to full resolution. Same thing happens in Premiere Pro for those of you that are going to be working in it as well. It goes through as you're playing it, playback resolution is down. Once you pause it, it automatically goes back to full resolution. So this does allow us to go through and begin to preview what is here. So in this case, if we want to go ahead, we can play it and we can watch what's happening with our video. Now, I have it set to loop, so we can go ahead and keep watching. Allows you to look around at everything that's taken place. Are you happy with the way it looks? If you're happy with the way that it looks, we can go ahead and stop this. Now, at some point, you may decide that you don't want to see everything that's on there. You're going to work with different areas. We can come over here and we can toggle things off. So I can click on the eye, and you'll notice that we no longer have the title block in there. That's perfectly fine. Maybe you're looking at different things. You have too much stuff going on the screen, so you don't want to actually go in and see what is there. Now, as it goes through and plays, you're going to see some stuff across the top of the timeline here indicating exactly what's happening with it. If you go through and you see this green bar, it's indicating that's already cached everything to RAM, so it's gone through and rendered that out. At some point, you might start to see that it's going to get dropped. So we start seeing red and yellow. Expect your playback to either not render something out, or it's going to actually play much slower. Once we have that set, we can go ahead and we can uncheck the space bar, and we can go ahead and we can save what we have here for our project. Now, we can go in. There's a lot of things we can do inside of our preferences. So if you want to go in here and work with After Effects, we have preferences. These are all things we can go through and begin to adjust. On a shared computer such as this one, I don't encourage you to go in and change a bunch of stuff, because if you go in and you start to change what is inside of here, what you're going to find is that when you sit down, you may be frustrated because somebody else went in and changed it, or you may come in and decide that you want something one way, and then they just keep changing it back and forth. If you go in here and you click inside of here, all of these have access to them. You can see we have our general look. There's previews in here. So what are we looking for zoom quality? Imports. What are we doing with imports by default? Again, don't go in here and change these on a shared computer. Your own personal one you can do. There is the ability to go in here on appearance. So if for some reason it's too dark, you'll see here you can actually adjust what's going on with this. The other thing that's available is you are able to come in here and actually you can change the highlight color. Leave it on blue. Some of the older ones were like a yellow, orange, yellow, whatever you want to call it. But these are abilities. There's the auto save capability inside of here. So what's going to happen is as you start to work with stuff, it's going to auto save. You'll see it says save every 20 minutes. So it will automatically go through and save it on 20 minutes. You could adjust that if you wanted to. So that way as you work, just know that as you get on larger projects, as you go in, it'll save. And if it takes 30 seconds to save, yes, it seems nice that every 5 minutes you tell it to save, but every 5 minutes you're losing 30 seconds while it saves. So just keep that in mind as you go through and work. Save when starting render queue. That way if you go through and start to render it, if it does crash, it will automatically have you save it, or will save it before it goes into the render setup. It's going to hold on to 5 project versions, so you can go back in and look at that. You can look at the settings that are inside of here. We're not going to go in and change anything inside of there. So now once we came to the end, you should be able to go ahead and play out and see your individual animation and listen to the audio. Make sure the audio is on there. In this case, it's just kind of a background track that is here. So that can go through and that can play, and you can watch your dog swimming in your pool while it's on the move.